Hello everyone, my name is Sarah Falion. I'm a dietitian, nutritionist, and I'd like to welcome you to the San Ildefonso Pueblo Nutrition Education Program. We have monthly programs with nutrition topics and then also a cooking demonstration to follow. So we're very excited to be here today. I want to welcome everyone and give out a few shout outs to those that are helping making these programs possible. In particular to Governor McKeno, the Tribal Council, Troy Campbell, Dine Enciso, Martha Cook, Marie Campos, Lenny Pena, and especially to Raylene Martinez, and all of you who are helping with the Special Diabetes Program for Indians. And also a shout out to all of you who've beamed in wherever you are. I appreciate your taking the time to learn some things that might help your health in regards to nutrition. So today we're going to talk about a plant-based diet and what that means. For some of you, this may be something that's you're not familiar with, and maybe you don't have very many vegetables in your diet. And so hopefully after today, you'll have some ideas, some things to work with. You'll see that there's tremendous benefit to eating a plant-based diet. There's a lot of research for heart health, diabetes, weight management, many health benefits for eating a plant-based diet. So Michael Pollan is an author and a journalist, and I really admire him greatly. And what he says is eat food, not too much, mostly plants. And so that basically summarizes, you know, what I'm here to tell you today. The outline of the program, we will look at what is a plant-based diet, some of the benefits, how you can work with this at home, how you can get started, some suggestions that you can try on your own at home. And then we'll look at some foods that will be prepared in our cooking demonstration. We'll have a summary and then opportunity for comments and questions. So what is a plant-based diet? This is a diet that includes mostly food from plant sources. So this would include foods such as vegetables, fruits, legumes, beans, whole grains, oils, seeds, and nuts. And it's also important, I think, to point out that we want to limit processed foods, foods with additives, extra salt, sugar, fat, foods with food colorings and all kinds of chemicals that we don't need. You want to eat foods in their more natural state. Closer to how they exist in nature. So an example of this would be an apple. An apple is one food and it's unprocessed compared with something like an apple fritter, which has apple slices, but it's also batter fried. So there are a lot of different variations within a plant-based diet. And some of these are quite limited and very sort of strict and rigid, and then there's a lot of different variations. So we'll go through each one, but just to list them, there's the vegan, you may have heard of vegan diet, vegetarian, lacto-ovo-vegetarian, pesco-vegetarian, and then I had never heard of this one, flexitarian or semi-vegetarian. I think that's where I fall. So looking at this slide, it defines each of these different categories. The vegan would be the most restrictive. This is a challenging diet to follow. There's absolutely no animal product, animal foods within this diet. And some people may not even eat honey, nothing associated with any animal, or even in that case, insects. So next, we would look at a vegetarian diet, which is plant-based. Again, you know, you're looking at the whole grains, vegetables, fruits, healthy oils. but no animal flesh, no animal foods per se. Then if you look at something like the lacto-ovo vegetarian diet, lacto refers to dairy, ovo refers to eggs. So those two items would be included in a lacto-ovo vegetarian diet. Maybe you would restrict the dairy, so it would just be ovo vegetarian, or maybe you would restrict the eggs, it would just be lacto. If you include both, then you would have lacto-ovo vegetarian. The pescatarian is a vegetarian diet mostly, but it will include from time to time fish or seafood. And then the most liberal of these diets is the flexitarian. It is primarily a plant-based diet, but people will include other, perhaps some animal protein, or perhaps from time to time, different like chicken or fish or pork, beef, things like that, but mostly plant-based. And I think this one has the most promise, and it might be something that each of you consider. Just keep an open mind to eating vegetables and incorporating more plant foods in your diet. According to this study by the Nielsen report in 2018, 40% of Americans are shifting toward eating more plant-based foods. And I think that we're going to see more of this in the future. A lot of our young people are going towards this way of eating because to raise cattle, especially, the land and the water usage is just not sustainable. So I think there's a lot to be said for a plant-based diet. Many benefits, as I mentioned earlier. A lot of this has been researched by within various, Diabetes Association and various cardiac heart association groups. Did a lot of studies, and it makes sense that it would lower heart disease if you're not eating a lot of animal fat products, less cholesterol, less triglycerides potentially, and also if less salty foods, less processed foods, as we talked about, less chance for high blood pressure. Also, it can help treat and prevent diabetes. And this statement here says, well, I'll get to that a little bit later. Actually, I have a quote for that, but it can slow the progression of kidney disease. And, there's some theory that perhaps people are eating way too much protein and that's a burden on the kidneys and that can contribute to kidney failure. So helping with that is a great benefit. Helping also with maintaining a healthy weight or losing weight. You're having less meat foods, especially if they're fried and things like that, they add a lot of calories, so that can contribute to weight gain. There are challenges with eating a plant-based diet. It definitely requires more cooking, more attention to shopping, making sure you have a balance of various protein, fat, and carbohydrate, not too much of the carby foods, because for those of you who are diabetic, you want to balance that out with protein and fat. So I list this slide on risk factors for heart disease because I know many of you have these conditions, or you have family members who have these conditions or these risk factors. And 3 out of the 4 actually can be addressed with diet. So we have diabetes as a risk factor, high blood pressure, being overweight or obesity, and then also smoking. And so this just raises the question of, where do you want to start? I don't necessarily suggest, starting a diet, quitting smoking, and starting physical activity all in the same week. But maybe pick an area that you're willing to look at and that you're willing to change, and get comfortable with that for a few months, and then you can pick up something else. And I will let people know that I am available if you want some help with planning your diet, or you have questions about your nutrition or meal planning, things like that. But these are the four major risk factors for heart disease. And this quote is from American Diabetes Association, and they state here that improving adherence to a plant-based diet was associated with a lower risk for type 2 diabetes, whereas decreased adherence to these diets was associated with a higher risk. So what that is saying is that by following a plant-based diet in some form, you're less likely to develop diabetes, whereas if you don't follow those plant-based diet, there is an association of a higher risk for developing diabetes. So everybody wants to know, what can I eat and how can I get started? So again, this may be a challenge for some of you. I just encourage you to kind of keep an open mind, to maybe try some of these things to see if there's something that you can integrate into your diet. I like this slide because it shows very clearly half of your plate is vegetables. And particularly, we've talked about this before, the non-starchy vegetables. So you see there's greens, looks like there's some carrots, I think some beans in there. So that's half of your plate. And you'll see just a small amount of protein. It's just like a quarter of the plate. So that's more like a garnish than the centerpiece of the meal. And then in particular for diabetics, you want to really watch your starch portions, but a little bit is okay. You do need some. So that's about a quarter of your plate. And then along with that, you're choosing healthy fats, olive oil, nuts and seeds, nut butters, avocado, because that's going to give you the calories that you're not going to get with less meat or animal protein. So other things to think about is to maybe consider cooking a vegetarian meal once a week. And you'll hopefully get some ideas today. Dine is going to be presenting a cooking demonstration. You'll learn some ideas of some actual meals that you can make that don't involve any animal protein. And so a lot of these will involve meals with beans, grains, and vegetables. And you can, you'll get some ideas later on this, but perhaps bean patty, black bean patty, or grilled vegetables. Look at that, those look wonderful. And the holidays coming up, the 4th of July, everybody likes to crank up their grill. Consider making some vegetable kebabs, and maybe a little bit less meat, maybe a little bit more vegetable. Go for greens. Definitely greens have a lot of nutritional benefit, a lot of minerals, fiber. So things like kale, collard greens, chard, spinach, lettuce. These are things that you can steam. Some things are raw, like the salads, lettuce, or grilled vegetables. It makes them very tasty. Another thing that you can consider is making a meal out of a salad. So you have lettuce as sort of the foundation, and then you can put in some of your favorite vegetables and make that a full meal. And maybe you don't have any animal protein, or maybe you put a little bit of sliced chicken or some sliced beef in there. But mostly what it is it's the vegetables. And then certainly having fruit for dessert is a great idea to satisfy that taste, that desire for sweet, but it's not going to overpower you, overwhelm you. So this slide gives you more ideas of a plant-based diet and some of the foods that you can include. And I don't necessarily agree with all of these servings. That would really depend on your age and your activity level and that sort of thing, but it gives you ideas anyway. And mostly what we see here is a lot of non-starchy vegetables. You've got your greens at the top, and here, and then you've got, sorry about that, you've got some legumes, beans. Looks like there's some black beans, some pinto beans, lentils. Those can provide more protein, and that can be sort of the basis of your meal. And then things like, slices of avocado, nuts and seeds, that will add some flavor and give you some extra calories. And then the whole grains, things like barley, brown rice, whole grain pasta, things like that. So there's lots of ways to incorporate a plant-based diet into your day-to-day meals. So these are some suggestions for things that you can try at home. Eating your favorite vegetable. Now, if every day, but for some of you, if you're not even eating once a day, start with once a day. And then if you're already doing that, maybe increase it to 2 or 3 times a day. But trying to get vegetables at each of your meals. And you can vary how you prepare them. Last night I made a salad, and instead of just dicing the carrots, I shredded it with a shredder. I'd seen our chef Dine do that the other last month, and it's very nice because it's very thin slices, and so that'll vary it a little bit. I think variety is important. Grilling the vegetables, that I think might really appeal to a lot of people, especially in the summer now that we're outdoors more. And the idea of all of this is to just include more vegetables, more plant-based diet, and less meat. And another idea is to have a meatless meal once a week. You can pick a day of the week and prepare one of these meals that doesn't have any animal protein. So now we're going to move into looking at 4 food items that will be a part of the cooking demonstration later. And the first item is black beans. And I think most of you cook a lot with pinto beans. Black beans have a lot of nutrition, and they're very tasty. And you can eat them like you would pinto beans, or you could make things like dips, or today we're going to see black bean burgers. And so there's a variety of ways that you can utilize the black beans. They are a good source of energy. It's sort of what we call a balanced food, and it has protein and carbohydrate. No fat unless it's cooked with fat. And it's a good source of fiber, calcium, and potassium. So next, let's look at brown rice. Many of you probably cook more with the white rice. I really encourage you to try to switch to brown rice because there's much more nutrition. It hasn't been bleached, it hasn't been stripped of its bran and nutrients. And the brown rice in particular is a good source of B vitamins, including niacin, magnesium, zinc, and copper. Also a good source of fiber, and it does have a trace amount of protein. It is mostly carbohydrate, so for those of you who are, watching your carbs or counting your carbs, you want to kind of measure how much you have and probably try to limit that to about 1/2 cup at a meal. Walnuts. These are mostly fat, about 65% fat. It's actually an excellent source of what we call omega-3 fatty acids, and these are really good for the heart. They also are good for the brain. They're a good source of energy. They're high in calories. But it's interesting that in some of the reading I did in preparation for this talk, it's apparent that usually when people incorporate the walnuts into the diet, if they cut back on some other snacky foods, there's no weight gain. So it's a good source of energy, but in balance, it's not going to contribute to weight gain. It does have some source of protein, And it's also rich in what we call antioxidant compounds. We'll talk about these more maybe perhaps at another presentation, but these can be anti-inflammatory. And so conditions like diabetes and heart disease are essentially conditions of inflammation. So when we can include some foods that will help lower that, that's a great benefit. So mushrooms. So these are the cremini mushrooms that Dina will be cooking with. And the mushrooms are mostly water. They are an excellent source of riboflavin, which is a B vitamin. And they also a good source of phosphorus, potassium, selenium, niacin, copper, and also vitamin D. They do have trace amounts of protein, fat, and carbohydrate, but they add flavor mostly, I think, and a little bit of just variety in taste. So this is a concept that you may not be familiar with. It's something called the doctrine of signature. And this is in folk medicine, the belief is that certain plants resemble the body part that they can heal. And so this is an example. You can see the picture of the brain, and then to the right is the walnut. And you can see pretty clearly there's two distinct sort of hemispheres, so to speak, in the brain, and you can see sort of that configuration with the walnut. Walnuts are, as I mentioned, a good source of these omega-3 fatty acids, which help with brain health, particularly with helping with depression. And there's some studies that show that it may slow other age-related brain decline. So in summary, it's really eat more plants. That's basically it. We talked about the different types of plant-based diets, the health benefits of eating a plant-based diet, how to include some of these vegetables in your meals and in your day-to-day eating. And then we looked at beans, brown rice, and walnuts and mushrooms and their nutritional benefit. So I've listed some resources here that may be of interest to you. The first one is a chef. His name is Sean Sherman. He's an Ogallala Lakota chef, an author, educator. He's won some major awards. He's known internationally. His book is called The Sioux Chef's Indigenous Kitchen. If you Google him, you can, he's got some videos that you can watch. He's on YouTube. It's very interesting. I think you would enjoy looking at some of his cooking demonstrations and some of his comments about food. And he's done a lot of research to come up with sort of a pre-colonized diet, what that might have looked like. Michael Pollan, I mentioned earlier, he has a Netflix miniseries called Cooked, and that may interest you. There's also, he has a PBS special. You may be able to check that out or check out YouTube on that. The third one is Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Now, this Dr. Neil Barnard, the founder, he's a little bit controversial, but he has promoted the vegan diet to help cure, quote unquote, diabetes. And, you know, I think that's, I'm not so sure that I totally agree with everything that he says, but I think he has a lot of good information on his website. There's a lot of specific diets and recipes and things for vegan diet. And he's had a lot of success clinically in helping people get better control of their diabetes. So that might be something that you might want to look at. And then I mentioned to the program here at the Pueblo, I am available for nutrition consultations. They're 50-minute sessions, and you can call Raylene at this number to help set up an appointment. So for that, with that, I thank you, and I wish you good health.